Hi, and welcome to day 2 at Mobile World Congress, live with Dr. Tim Bottke, our global TM&E leader, and, honorary doctorate, Dr. Paulie, MWC expert. So here we are. Paul, yesterday you had a presentation, a panel, talking about 5G and all things 5G. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what happened on your panel yesterday?
Yeah, so the panel was looking at a wide scope. So it was called The Edge of Intelligence, and about the confluence of 5G, AI, and IoT. So it's a very wide panel, and the question that I was asking everyone was, but how does all this monetize? So we've had private 5G at the Fiera for many, many years, so going back to 2017. We've had IoT for even longer. AI is decades old, but how do you bring all of that together? So that's some of the ideas that we were talking through. And one of the messages coming through was partly you've got to bring all the data together and work out how to make it commercialized. And there was one comment from one of the speakers who said, remember, there is no client who wakes up and says, I need a private 5G network. What they want is to fix a problem or to generate a new business line, but it's often to fix a problem. Now, whether that message got through or not to the audience, I don't know. But that's what we talked about yesterday, was monetizing what the confluence of all these technologies can do.
Oddly, I have private 5G nightmares every night, but that's a separate issue.
Yeah.
Tim, you've got a panel tomorrow
Yeah.
looking at agentic, and agentic is everywhere here. What are we going to be chatting? I mean, spoilers. We're going to give away some of the panel. What are you going to talk about tomorrow?
Yes, we can. I'm really excited about the panel tomorrow because, as you said, it's all over the place, but all telcos out there have one major challenge: to go from a little pilot here and there, or many pilots all over the place, to something which scales. And to make that happen, you need to know where to start first, which processes will you adjust, where would you want to keep humans in the loop for whatever reason, and then derive the economic impact which you want to achieve, and all that sitting on a legacy system infrastructure, which in paper is easy to agentify, but in reality is a major change and transformation project. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow. And I'm really curious to hear what's happening, because as I said, in theory, agentic is the solution. In practice, it's just one component of a major transformation.
Right, and there are certain telco applications where the size of the agentic prize is higher and
Yes.
others where it's lower.
Yes, that's one thing, and you can start. We use the ETOM framework as a starting point in our agentic work, but we all know in reality almost no telco is operating really according to any framework. So there's a lot of legacy. Some clients have, 5 different order management systems, 2 billing systems, a lot of acquisitions piled on, and it's very hard then to see what is the really status of where you start from, because that's something you need to know to understand where do you want to get and what's the path in between,
Right.
and how do you take your organization with you.
So, Paul, you were talking 5G yesterday. Now, I have started seeing 6G signs all over the place again, and every telco I know is like, after having spent hundreds of billions of dollars globally on spectrum and new gear, they're just dying to launch a new network any day now. Any thoughts on 6G?
Yeah, so we've been looking at 6G signals, not literal signals, but physical signals around the show for the last 3 years. And I would say 2 years ago, there were quite a few signs. Last year, they disappeared. This year, there's a bit more signage, but there's actually very little discussion of what the applications may be. And where there is a discussion of what 6G may be, it is very much talking about the science of it and what the applications could be. So it doesn't feel very tangible right now. And what I think the operators are more focused on is actually AI and applying AI to get more value out of 5G. And it comes back to, how are you monetizing your network? That is the challenge for all these operators. And I see a lot more tangibility with what companies are trying to do with 5G, whether it's agentic or plain vanilla AI, than actually with 6G. And so in some halls, you see 6G in all the big banners. But then you go into the stands and no one has 6G applications. And it's fascinating, the lack of it. And I know that there are some people looking at this as, is this a sign of maturity amongst the operators in terms of making the right investments as opposed to investing in technologies which may not pay through?
So we're still at the feeds and speeds portion of the 6G discussion. Tim, what about you? What are you seeing on 6G?
I think that the major history of our industry is that you always need the next thing. And when it shows up again, it means that the previous one, 5G, is now being the one worked on. So when you want to sell 5G, you need 6G because then 5G is the major thing in the market. And I agree with Paul that the monetization of 5G is now the major thing to work on. But you need something at the end of the tunnel, which is 6G, and then starting with smaller use cases and then building it up over time. But I don't see it happening at scale very soon.
Okay. Now, one of the things that went on here at the show yesterday was that an unnamed space-based company announced new versions of satellites which will be offering direct-to-device, so cell phone signals from space, essentially, at much higher speeds than their previous version and higher capacities. Does that matter for terrestrial telcos?
I believe in the end it will help. It will help tremendously, but not as a single service, but integrated in the overall footprint so that you have seamless interconnection all the time. And then you will be on the 5G network for some time. And then if you're in some remote area, in whatever country, in whatever situation, you can have satellite access. I don't see it as a single service. I see it as an integrated part of a multi-technology solution for access.
Well, Paul, I want to drill down a little. I was always surprised, you and I have been having conversations. In the south of England, there is a surprisingly high, very, very low single digit, satellite broadband penetration. Does D2D change that, accelerate that, alter that?
So in terms of the penetration of satellite, that's all for fixed broadband, and that's a function of the rate at which some of the more remote areas are being migrated to fiber to the home. So it's a temporary solution, and by the end of the decade, probably that demand will have largely gone. But when it comes to D2D, so for mobility, I was talking to somebody earlier today who was saying within the UK, there is almost nowhere where you actually need a D2D solution. Almost nowhere. So they had to look very hard to find specific parts of the UK to do that. Now, that's the UK. We're not that great at implementation. In Germany, where far better, I expect there may be even fewer of those black spots.
But meanwhile, as the Canadian in the room, it would be obviously a very different thing.
Of course.
What with the mountains and the glaciers and the bears and all that. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Tim. That was day 2 here at Mobile World Congress. Join us tomorrow for day 3. I'll be joined by Paul yet again and Girisha Krishnamurthy, our global technology leader, and we'll be wrapping up Mobile World Congress for yet another year. See you then.